teacher training initiatives, as well as the Global Challenges Forum Foundation for over a decade now. He's enthusiast in collaborations with UNITAR for creating awareness and implementation avenues for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by influencing public policy through international networks. Dr. Moses, welcome, and looking forward to hear what you have to share with us today.
Thank you very much, Alexander, and my esteemed colleagues at the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, distinguished panelists, and members of the global audience. I'm going to speak about the concept of coding for social capital. Basically, I'm going to paint a picture, a big picture, a holistic integration of concept mapping and lateral thinking to elucidate this phenomenon. Next slide, please. So if you look at the definition of coding, and if you look at how science and technology combine a system of words, letters, figures, symbols, and languages used to represent others for classification or identification, orchestrated through machines, computers, artificial intelligence, and genetics. So basically, if you look at the technical definition of coding, it is the act of writing a set of instructions for the computer in order for the computer to carry out some functions or tasks very effectively. And this is how coding is helping man-machine interfaces in building up social capital. Now, what is social capital? The network of relationships, basically, among people who live and thrive and work together in a particular society, enabling that society to function effectively. Now, human capital is actually the stock and the building block of social capital. It is an individual perspective, and the definition is over there. And we have to unlock our potential as human beings in order to contribute to society for financial capital. That being said, human beings are priceless. This creates innovative environments. Now, if you look at machine code and genetic code for leveraging the human capital, you need to look at how machinery can encode instructions through programming and languages. So many kinds of programming languages have come into the market, and they are also useful for students and children at all age groups to learn and grow. But you need to understand that actually the human body is hardwired with a genetic code in itself. So you have purines and pyrimidines, building blocks known as deoxyribonucleic acid. These purines and pyrimidines are basically a sequence of alphabets, A, T, and GC. And there are combinations. There's a sugar phosphate backbone, and all of you will have studied the cell and how that gives rise to organs and tissues. So basically, the neuroscience of the brain is hardwired to receive information through alphabets, through symbols, through numbers, right from early childhood in the Broca and Wernicke's areas. So when we write a set of instructions for the computer and the machine to encode or decode and function effectively, you need to understand the relationship is reciprocal between man and machine interfaces. And you have these supercomputers and chips and all kinds of careers coming through because of coding for social capital to leverage how machines can enhance substantive financial gain in different countries. If you look at the anthropology of human beings, they have traversed through time and places across continents, and they have come through so many years of hard work. And today we have machines to help us. In the past, there weren't any machines. And the beauty and aesthetics to leverage human capital to scaffold onto social capital and thereby enhance the whole fabric of dynamic society. Next slide, please. Now, if you look at social capital, winning the race together, competing is good, but collaborating, that's the winning formula. There are riches in cultural identity, unity, and diversity. The concept of Ubuntu needs to be understood. I am because we are, or I am who I am because of you, and you are who you are because of me. So how we have this wonderful concept of humanity being depicted through this definition. A very interesting study on genetic analysis was carried out by Senator Elizabeth Warren over 160,000 Americans were analyzed, and the genetic structure was analyzed. And three compositions of populations: African Americans, Latinos, and European Americans. And they showed genome homology and heterogeneity. And they were startled to see that they were of a mixed race. So this is how it is. So I think we need to celebrate our differences, because we all come from different backgrounds. And most of these Americans, almost all of them, had some, genetic influence of Native American gene structure. Next slide, please. So macroeconomics, using technology, machinery, and architecture for social change, industrialization, and national interests for national productivity and GDP fund allocation. So why is coding so important for children? Like I said, the human being any child is innately encoded with the DNA made up of alphabets. The genetic code is made up of alphabets. So we are hardwired to receiving information which is alphabetical, numerical, and symbolical. So children can automatically pick this up. It is good for analytical reasoning and critical thinking, creative thinking. It also gives them career opportunities in data science, which are fast-growing, machine learning and big data. And you have all kinds of design processes and machinery that is used for data mining, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, so many careers, myriads of career and plethora of career avenues for these students to build up a very good social capital in their ecosystem and across the world. Next slide, please. Cutting edge technology can help create enriched environments. Children love these apps and game-based learning platforms, and the SDGs and social capital and happiness index. I mean, it's intriguing to see how the whole aspect of enriched environments can create a social capital, basically, and happiness quotient that is enumerated. Actually, you can measure this. There's also a gross domestic product, but there's also a gross national happiness quotient, and you need to study some of these things. And the SDGs, or the United Nations Sustainable Developmental Goals, they have to be taken very seriously. We have to personalize these for our students, for our children, for the younger generations, so that they can be empowered to make a change for human capital, for personalizing their own limitations and overcoming their limitations, and looking at how they can embark on social capital. Now let's personalize the Sustainable Developmental Goals. In 2015, they instituted these excellent goals, 17 of these goals, and all of them encompass aspects of economic, social, and environmental change. So people, planet, peace, prosperity, and partnerships are the focus areas. So let us look at how we can use these 17 goals to transform our worlds. This is transformative education. Next slide, please. Looking at social capital and a case study of social capital, the United Nations. This is a depiction of a conglomeration and a diversity of individuals from different nations, tribes, and tongues, and irrespective of gender, background, socioeconomic milieu, all converging together for public policy decisions, for governance, for fund allocation, for conflict resolution, decision-making, problem solving. And it's such a unique and dynamic model of Ubuntu. And if we have shared responsibilities and a good understanding and a positivity around this entire concept, we need to appreciate that this organization was set up in 1945 after the World War II with a very ennobling vision to promote peace, harmony, and prosperity. And we have had these 9 very distinguished Secretary Generals of the United Nations, starting with Trygve Lie from Norway, Dag Hammarskjöld from Sweden, Yu Thant from Myanmar, Kurt Waldheim from Austria, Javier de Hula from Peru, Boutros Ghali from Egypt, Kofi Annan from Ghana, and we have Ban Ki-moon from South Korea. At the moment, since 2017, we have Antonio Guterres from Portugal. See, they have such a dilemma sometimes and such a consensus building. I mean, there have been very empowered and prolific members of the intelligentsia, spiritually endowed and empowered to advise some of these organizations. And they have had discussions and deliberations on almost complex topics like navigating through absolutes and absolutes in a pluralistic society, or the search for absolutes in a world of relativism. So reconciliation of seemingly contradictory and opposite ideas, consensus building, dialectics. So this is essential for us to understand and express solidarity in all ways, to express solidarity so there is a uniformity in percolation of the ethos and vision and mission of the United Nations in different schools, colleges, universities, corporations, and different countries. Next slide, please. So the United Nations Institute for Training and Research is the training and research branch. This branch is very useful and very, I would say, specific with the training and research part of the United Nations. And the United Nations works with governments, research institutions, schools, universities, and NGOs to partner with networks for public policy, SDG projects, social welfare, upliftment of underprivileged, needy sections of society, fundraising, allotment, and conferencing like this, and in person, face-to-face, across the world. Certain components of international schooling and international education, thankfully, have understood the validity of some of the work that the UN is doing. And the International Baccalaureate Organization even has the Model United Nations. It has the creativity, activity, and service component to sensitize people and human beings for the peace, prosperity, and nurturing the biodiversity and ecosystem, and visits, expeditionary learning visits across the world, and also imbibing the culture and ethos of consensus building and living with diversity and international mindedness through their curriculum programs. So we are appreciative of this, and we encourage other national curriculum boards and other countries to take this seriously, even universities to come on board in promoting the SDGs for social capital. Next slide, please. So there are several avenues for enhancing SDGs, and there are so many, and the most important ones have already been enlisted in the SDG goals. You can go through this slide a little later, but I would like to request all of you to look at social capital and human capital not as a phenomena, but try and personalize this. If you can take on the challenge of taking up one of these goals as your life's calling and vocation, and then get a group of people or friends, or look for like-minded individuals or organizations, work with them to build this social capital, it'll be more meaningful for you in your life. Next slide, please. Some of the projects that we are doing at the Global Challenges Forum Foundation, along with the United Nations Institute of Training and Research, are youth leadership, transformative education, looking at human capital, building social capital in the future. We want to have knowledge networking and public policy reforms, advisory and intergovernmental dialogue and diplomatic services offered. And we are looking and earmarking individuals and having such webinars in order to promote that. Next slide, please. Coding, man-made machine interfaces are here and here to stay. There's an evolving ecosystem. Today we are here on Earth. It is our home. That's great. But in the future, there could be future civilizations. Do you want to reach to the heavens? Why not? We can get there together. So let's look at this as a strategic foresight. And thank you very much for this opportunity. And I wish you all the very best. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Moses. Thank you for the eloquent introduction into social capital, its pertinence, and the history of why we're doing what we're doing and how we're going to utilize this to empower youth in the future. Go ahead and transition the floor to Sebastian Hofbauer, who is the program coordinator at the United Nations Institute of Training and Research. He is one of the partners and co-founders of the 1M 2030 initiative, which, as I have mentioned, and the purpose of this organization is to scale and develop 1 million youth leaders and social. Forward to hearing you engage with the audience.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alexander. As you mentioned, I co-founded One 2030 and I also work for a UN agency, UNITAR. And as such, I'm very happy to see the incredible work that is being done by all of our young panelists today. And I just have a kind of a small question for you, for all of you panelists. What can, in your opinion, what can the UN and other global organizations or movements do in very concrete terms to support you in what you're doing? Thank you.
Sebastian, can I answer this question?
Please, Moses, go ahead.
So I think what the UN and the United Nations Institute of Training and Research, under the very capable guidance of the distinguished diplomat there, Mr. Nikhil Seth, who is the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Director of the United Nations Institute of Training and Research, is doing in terms of capacity building with the youngsters, with the international education curriculum boards, the schools, getting schools on board. So if we can have collaborations orchestrated by some of our youth members and panelists to come on board, bringing awareness as one of the main fortes of the IM 2030, because the 1 million youth leaders are all in schools and colleges and universities. So if there's some sort of an orchestrated movement to reach out to schools and universities and colleges, I think we can have a whole, a build-up of youth taking up entrepreneurship projects, and also study tours and visits and many more such webinars regionally organized, and study visits after the COVID situation is over. So I think your team and with Julia Gent, I think this is possible. And with Mr. Alex Mejia, the Director for Division of Social and People Inclusion, this dream can be a reality.
And thank you everyone very much. And we look forward to seeing you again in our next webinar.